أجواء إيجابية إن شاء الله.
Good afternoon, December 30th. One more year till the new year. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television, and these are today's top stories. Speaker Nabih Berri warns that the region is witnessing major developments, the results of which are unpredictable. More than 80% of Lebanon's potable water doesn't meet health standards, according to Industry Minister Hussein Haj Hassan and Health Minister Wael Abu Faoud. And Syrians evacuated from two villages in Idlib province continue to arrive in Damascus in the early hours, as around 330 civilians trapped in two government areas are given safe passage. Good afternoon to our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. We begin today with Speaker Nabih Berri. Parliament Speaker warned on Wednesday that the region is witnessing major developments, the results of which he says are unpredictable. He said there are signs that a new map of the region is being drawn up on the ruins of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. He made his remarks during his weekly meeting with lawmakers at his Ain al-Tini residence. The challenges require the Lebanese people to adopt a responsible approach, he stressed, at the beginning of the new year in order to fortify constitutional institutions. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was a secret agreement between Britain and France at the end of World War I and the demise of the Ottoman Empire, which saw the division of the areas of what are now Lebanon, the Palestinian territories, Iraq, and Syria between the two European powers. Earlier this morning, media reports said that Berri had warned that the institutions are facing a great danger due to the obstruction of the parliament and cabinet. His visitors quoted him as saying, "Those who believe that obstructing parliament and government will resolve the presidential deadlock have been proven wrong, seeing as a head of state has not yet been elected." The head of the Future Parliamentary Bloc, MP Fouad Senoura, is stressing that Future Movement leader MP Saad Hariri is committed to the proposal he made on ending the presidential deadlock, according to various media. Senoura stated that the initiative has not collapsed and that it will be revitalized soon after the holiday season is over. He meanwhile accuses Iran of hampering efforts to end the impasse. Change and Reform Bloc Chief MP Michel Aoun and some Christian March 14 coalition parties are also behind the obstruction of the proposal, he said. Senoura later said that Hariri's proposal could not have been seen the light of day without an indirect Saudi-Iranian understanding. Hariri had proposed the nomination of Marada movement leader MP Sulaiman Fanjiyeh as president as part of a greater settlement that would revitalize the political scene in Lebanon. The move was met by reservations from Aoun and Hariri's allies in the March 14 camp, the Kata'ib Party, as well as the Lebanese forces. More than 80% of Lebanon's potable and drinkable water doesn't meet health standards, according to Industry Minister Hussein Haj Hassan and Health Minister Wael Abu Faoud. They revealed in a joint news conference this morning, quote, saying, "We are seeking to organize the water sector in Lebanon, and the relevant authorities will test water samples and equipment provided by companies selling bottled water." Abu Faoud announced that most of the tested samples taken from unlicensed water companies did not conform to the required standards. He said, "We gave them several grace periods to rectify their conditions, but by the beginning of the new year, we will shut down all those violating health standards." The health minister had issued previously several warnings to unlicensed water companies selling bottled drinking water to rectify their situation. They also said that water they supplied was contaminated and carried traces of sewage. Syrians evacuated from two villages in Idlib province arrived in Damascus in the earlier hours of this morning. Around 330 civilians as well as wounded fighters trapped in two pro-government villages in Idlib in northwestern Syria were given safe passage to Turkey on Monday. From Turkey's Hatay airport, they flew to Beirut before continuing their journey to a suburb of Damascus, which is under government control. On arrival, the evacuees said they were relieved. At the same time as the evacuees left the villages of Al-Fua and Kifreya, more than 125 fighters from the besieged rebel-held town of Zabadani near the border with Lebanon were en route to Beirut airport to board a plane to Turkey. The evacuations took place under a UN-sponsored agreement brokered by regional powers, part of efforts by the United Nations to set up local deals on ceasefires and safe passage. The evacuation deal was the most significant of several localized truces to date, involving months of mediation among warring parties. In return for allowing the rebels to leave, the deal allows the government of President Bashar al-Assad to restore control over areas that had been in rebel hands for the past 4 years. Russia's defense ministry says it has killed several leaders of ISIS outside their stronghold of Raqqa in Syria. The ministry says that it received a tip-off from the Syrian opposition last week about an upcoming meeting of ISIS leaders outside Raqqa and kept the area under surveillance for 2 days before a Su-34 bomber attacked the meeting place. The date of the strike was not disclosed. However, Russia is a staunch ally of President Bashar al-Assad, and it has been accused of using its Air Force operation in Syria, which began in September, in order to prop up Assad. The Defense Ministry said it is cooperating with unidentified representatives of patriotic opposition forces who have been providing Moscow with potential targets in Syria. Coming up next, a pair of British psychologists believe that better understanding of crowd psychology could be crucial to prevent a repeat of the disastrous crash at the Hajj. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the 420 o'clock news on Future Television. Iraq's foreign minister has reiterated demands that Turkish troops pull out of northern Iraq, warning Ankara that Baghdad may otherwise have to consider military action. A Turkey-Iraq spat flared up in early December after Turkey deployed reinforcements to a camp in northern Iraq's Bashika region, where Ankara is helping train Sunni and Kurdish fighters to battle ISIS militants. The deployment riled Baghdad, which considers the new troops an illegal incursion and which subsequently demanded their immediate and complete withdrawal. After Iraq's demand, Turkey began withdrawing the troops, but not completely. Iraqi Foreign Minister Brahim Jafari said that Baghdad will continue to pursue peaceful means, but that if there is no other solution and if fighting is imposed, then they will consider it and protect their sovereignty. Off to the United States of America, we're at campaign stops in Iowa and New Hampshire. In those respective states, U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump promised to spend up to $2 million the race at this week, and Hillary Clinton called the Islamic State's persecution of Yazidis a genocide. Aboard his private plane, Trump renewed criticism of Clinton, pledging to turn the tables on her and her husband, former President Bill Clinton, although he acknowledged his own indiscretions were fair game in the campaign. Take a look.
Yes, they would be, and frankly, Hillary brought up the whole thing with sexist, and all I did is reverse it on her because she's got a major problem, happens to be right in her house. So if she wants to do that, we're going to go right after the president, the ex-president, and we'll see how it all comes out. And I feel very confident that it'll come out very well for us. So I'll be spending a minimum of $2 million a week and perhaps substantially more than that.
I think I was asked this a couple of months ago, and I said, you know, that term carries with it legal import. It's a very important concept and label for behavior that deserves that name. And I said, we are only at the beginning of seeing this, and I'm not sure yet we have enough evidence. I am sure now we have enough evidence. What is happening is genocide, deliberately aimed at destroying not only the lives, but wiping out the existence of Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East in territory controlled by ISIS. And so I agree with you.
Pope Francis expressed sympathy for the thousands of people caught up in the flooding in the United States, Great Britain, as well as Latin America. Speaking at the weekly general audience at the Vatican, the Pope asked the congregation to pray for those affected by the extreme weather events. He said, quote, "I invite you to pray for the victims of the disasters which have recently hit the United States, Great Britain, and Latin America, in particular Paraguay, unfortunately causing deaths, homelessness, and damaged property. May God give comfort to these people and brotherly solidarity to help them with their needs," he told all those gathered. At least 13 people have died in Missouri in the United States since the weekend, when days of downpours from a massive winter storm system triggered the worst flooding in 2 decades. Britain, meanwhile, is bracing for more bad weather after towns, cities, and the countryside were deluged in recent days in the worst floods in the country since 2007. They are also saying that They are expecting a storm to hit Lebanon starting tomorrow in the PM. A pair of British psychologists believe that better understanding of crowd psychology could be crucial to prevent a repeat of this year's disastrous crush at the Hajj, which killed more than 2,000 Muslim pilgrims. Dr. John Drury and Anne Templeton of the University of Sussex have released a study showing the distinct differences between the behavior of two seemingly similar yet markedly different types of dense crowd present at large-scale events such as the Hajj. The first group is known as the physical crowd, a large group of people who have no overriding common identity but simply share the same physical space. The psychological crowd also inhibits a common space but share a social identity which influences the movement of individuals within it and encourage them to coordinate their behavior to move together. PhD student Templeton set up an experiment on the university campus in which one group of students were given black baseball caps to wear and asked to walk around campus together, while a second batch were filmed walking naturally as they left their lecture. Drury says his research on large confined crowds, such as the gathering of around 250,000 people, could show that communication is vital to proper planning.
Primed a bunch of undergraduate students to share a group identity, and then we gave them a task where they had to walk to a library square on Sussex campus, and we filmed them as they walked under a bridge and then tracked their behaviour. And we compared that behaviour to when they weren't primed at all, they weren't even really aware that they were being filmed, from when they were just walking back from the lecture anyway. And then we looked at behavioural differences between the two different scenarios. Is actually, even though the crowd have got the entire path that they can take up, they've got all the grass around it, what they're doing is they're sticking to one part of the path. They're actually staying close together, clustering close together. They're walking slower in order to keep close together with one another, and they're actually walking further in order to keep this formation, stay together as a group. And you wouldn't see this in the physical crowd, where people will be walking at different speeds and might be rushing past one another, apart from the small groups that are staying together.
What we found was those who felt more unity with the crowd actually felt more safe as the crowd got more dense rather than less safe, right? So that sounds strange and counterintuitive. And then we looked at some of the other measures and we got an explanation for that, which is the more that people identify with the crowd, the more that they expect social support. And this is a common feature of psychological crowds. But when you're an us or a we, you expect others to support you, to give you help and come to your aid. In the case of the Hajj, you'd be thinking, well, what kind of behaviours do Sunni Muslims like to do, and which kind of behaviours do Shia Muslims need to do? So, so it's knowing the identities of the crowd. Know your crowd means educate yourself beforehand on the identities and the norms. And then knowing that there are norms, knowing that with the capacity for collective self-regulation, what kinds of activities do you put in place from yourself to facilitate that? And the third point would be communication. Because communication doesn't just give information, communication changes relationships. It legitimises the person giving the communication, it leads the people being communicated with to identify with the person communicating with them, and then gets them to internalise instructions such as don't go there, it's not safe. Well, I believe that, now you're telling me that because you're one of us.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Speaker Nabih Berri warns that the region is witnessing major developments, the results of which are unpredictable. More than 80% of Lebanon's potable and drinkable water does not meet health standards. The words of Interior Minister Hussein Haj Hassan and Health Minister Wael Abu Faour. Syrians evacuated from 2 villages in Idlib continue to arrive in Damascus in the early hours, as around 330 civilians are part of a deal swap between rebels and the government of Bashar al-Assad. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yumna Nofal signing off. Have a good night.
الأجواء إيجابية إن شاء الله.